The instant this random number generator reaches 0, you'll be executed.
Oh.
Factorio is a well-balanced game. It starts simple and slowly ramps up the complexity as you're rewarded with more powerful buildings and logistical solutions. The science packs themselves guide you towards smarter playstyles by teaching you to automate things like inserters, belts, rails, or robot frames. Yes, with over a decade of care and consideration put into the player experience, Factorio is quite balanced. So, let's ruin all that. It seems jumping into the void last video has scrambled reality a bit, because today I've got two mods, Recipe Randomizer and Property Randomizer. One will randomize the recipes, and the other will randomize the stats of all the buildings and equipment. I've also turned up the randomization to the maximum values, because if you're going to do this, you might as well go all the way. But without further ado, here we go. So at first everything was terrible, as you'd expect, but it got even worse when I realized that it was physically impossible to progress because the stone brick recipe took iron ore, but any iron ore put inside of a furnace automatically turns into iron plates instead, leaving no way to actually get bricks. This mod is designed so that you can't get stuck behind recipes you haven't researched yet, but I guess this one particular case slipped through the cracks. And after changing my seed, my bricks are now made out of iron plates. Yes, welcome to the randomizer. Just looking through all these recipes, it's already cursed. Iron plates to make copper cable, huh? Well, the more pressing issue at hand is the nest that's decided to spawn right next to my copper. That's no problem, I'll just... my ammo is made out of guns. I need to make a gun and then turn it into bullets. It's also 6 times more expensive than usual, so I guess I'll need to do this the old-fashioned way. Thankfully, the Factorio engineer is trapped in the cycle of rebirth, and I can just keep coming back with 10 magazines to try and slowly whittle down the worms by shooting guns at them. We're already off to a great start. And as soon as all the worms are gone, I'm able to grab some fish and finish off the nests with my mighty fists. It's funny how few people seem to know you can just punch nests apart, but it's not like I can blame them considering how awful it is. You know you're desperate when the axe comes out. With that taken care of, I can finally start playing the game, and even the output of the miners are randomized. It's telekinetically dropping the coal into a chest 5 meters away. Right now, the biggest challenge is figuring out what the heck I even need to get the ball rolling. Just a single mining drill takes 30 coal and 15 iron copper cables, and 3 stone furnaces. Already, that's several times more expensive than vanilla, so my early game is going to be slowed down considerably. So many things this run took insane amounts of coal, and naturally, to add insult to injury, the game made my coal only stack to 25. Yes, even the stack sizes are randomized. All I can really do is my best and hover around these mining drills as they magically teleport ores into the furnaces. The mining speed is actually a little higher than usual, but it doesn't come close to compensating for the ridiculous costs that most of these items ended up with. I'm pretty sure I'm the only Factorio player in the world who's actually beaten the game on expensive mode, but right now it feels a lot like that, which is to say, very slow. When the mining jewels are 5 times as expensive, you'd think that it would take 5 times as long, but it actually takes longer because the more mining drills you can get up, the faster you'll get resources to make more. So right now, we're less exponential and more logarithmic. Finally, I'm ready to start getting some beginning power going, and I'm just freaking out reading these steam boiler stats. It's difficult to understand with the efficiency and steam temperature changes, but as far as I can tell, the single boiler spits out about 4 times as much steam as usual. Flip side, the steam engines have terrible efficiency and waste about 30% of the steam. Well, you can't win them all, but you can make do. This is all in the pursuit of science, and our red science is made from iron plates and raw copper ore. Despite the craziness, the fundamentals haven't changed, and so we're going to want to leap right into researching assemblers in the hope of speeding this whole thing up. After a while, I wonder why it's taking so long, only to realize that my labs are 1/3 the speed they usually are. You really gotta read the fine print with this mod. Setting up my first electric mining drill, the output is incredibly far away, but the good news is, despite being several tiles to the right, it's still directly in front of it, so I'll be able to use belts as usual. Oh, and they're like 6% faster. Hooray. Just like any run, our main priority is some quick belt automation, and they take a bunch of iron copper cables and raw iron ore. Also, they're over 6 times as expensive as usual, and slower. Also, look at the absolute state of these inserters. It only turns at 60 degrees per second. That's like 6 seconds to put a single item in. I'm better off using burner inserters. Thankfully, long inserters are mostly normal. Everything being super expensive is definitely slowing this down considerably, so all I can really do right now is wait until I can stockpile enough resources to hopefully automate things entirely. But I'm also making these intermediate products, like iron gears made out of copper ore. Funnily enough, out of everything, the iron rods are almost normal. They actually take iron. Usually you can get by with one lab, but they are super slow. Also, my tier 1 assemblers are crazy fast with a crafting speed of 1.9, so this is no problem at all. At least something is in my favor here. Continuing my long and laborious bootstrapping process, I'm making pistols. Never in a million years did I imagine myself unironically automating pistol production, but here we are. They do more than make bullets, they're also instrumental in making steam engines, which are also necessary for green science. Belts are still at a premium, so I'll be transporting all of these pistols manually with my good old-fashioned legs. Just like the red science, I'll be making this temporary setup to get some early research out of the way. Seriously, don't be afraid to just chuck things in a box and make some quick dirty automation. Now, there are biters about, and I'd rather not be caught unprepared, so I'll be making some more ammunition. Not the kind made of pistols, the red kind, and for that I'll need steel, which is made from bricks, which are made from iron. Yes, the well-known intermediary brick phase in the steel-making process. I'll also need some copper plates and gears, but I'll just supply those by hand. Expanding power and seeing more than 2 steam engines running off of a single boiler feels deeply and viscerally wrong. This whole run is screwing with my brain. But with that ammunition, I'll take out all of the nearby nests at risk of entering my pollution cloud. My progress is incredibly slow, so my pollution isn't that big of an issue. And we've actually got pollution-absorbing trees this time, but it's mostly for peace of mind. All you need to clear early nests are a couple gun turrets and fast fingers. There we are, one less thing to worry about. Now I'm going to want to get some actual automation going, but I'm going to need to severely limit my ambitions. If you're wondering why I'm placing the copper ore on the belts with inserters, it's because the splitters take fast inserters, which I can't even make yet. Also, seeing as my yellow inserters are next to worthless, everything needs to be long inserters. We'll do the same thing with iron, but in the meantime, I actually managed to research the better inserters. My fast inserters are expensive and fairly mediocre, but my filter inserters on the other hand are turbo speed and cheap to boot. That means I'll be using filter inserters pretty much everywhere, which requires the additional step of switching their mode to blacklist so that they'll essentially function as a normal inserter. I'll also be making these circuits which take stone and copper, and then trying to construct this rudimentary bus. This is also when I'm realizing that my underground belt length is 1, so now this cliff in front of me is an insurmountable obstacle. Time to go around it. Right now my main priority isn't automating science, it's automating all of the basic supplies I'll need. The recipes are several times more complicated with the randomizer, but that just makes automating them even more important. You might have noticed that it's taken me 3 hours just to get this far, and these recipes are precisely why. Also, the spaghetti this run was created by trained professionals. Do not attempt at home. Seriously, even if splitters weren't expensive and annoying to make, my undergrounds are too short to even go over a splitter, so this is the only way I can actually pull things off of the bus. I'll say one thing about this mod, it certainly inspires some unique problem solving. Well, that's assemblers and mining drills. Next I'll want real belt automation as well as filter inserters. As soon as you have inserters, belts, and assemblers automated, the game immediately opens up. And while I was building all that, our crappy science setup has managed to research red belts. I've been eyeing these things since the beginning because they're actually cheaper than yellow belts. Not only that, they're nearly as fast as blue belts. The undergrounds are painfully expensive, and I won't be able to make splitters until I research solar panels, but these will be invaluable. I've also automated some pipes. It feels really weird for the underground pipes to take something that isn't regular pipes to build, but that's this run in a nutshell. With the basics out of the way, I can start thinking about expanding production a little, and this is what I meant about the miners being mostly normal, because I can just run the belt straight through the middle. Now that I've got actual automation, this is much less painful, and pretty soon I've got another small furnace stack set up. Seeing everything using purple inserters instead of blue inserters is kinda trippy. It's about time I rebuilt the sciences, so here we go making pistols again to turn them into steam engines. I'll also need some iron rods and copper plates, which I'll move like so. Thankfully, with the red belts, I have access to undergrounds longer than one, even if they are crazy expensive to make. Combine those with the pipes we made earlier, and that's our green science. Red science is still quite simple, and once again, taking things off the bus without splitters continues to be its own little challenge. Once that's done, I'll just bring it in like so, snaking right through this monstrosity. It doesn't need to be pretty, it just needs to get the job done, and now I can finally set up some proper labs. Again, these science packs are several times more expensive than usual, and these labs much slower, so don't be fooled when you see them all working like this. Our actual science production is still incredibly slow. Actual science requires actual power, and I was wondering why my engines weren't making as much as they should until I realized that they were starved for water because my offshore pumps only move 200 water per second instead of 1200. This mod is making me lose my mind. Well, with power expanded, we've got whatever this is. Look, I'd like to see you try. I've got a car now, so it's time for some more biter spring cleaning. As long as you can keep the nests outside of your pollution, you'll never need to bother building defenses, and at this level of evolution, they rarely expand. My car's health is like halved, so this is bound to happen. It is slightly faster than usual, however, so that's nice. I've still got tons of red and green research to churn through, so I'll be automating some more things like medium power poles, which take red science of all things, and rails as well as cargo wagons. I'd hoped to try and bring order to this chaos with locomotives, but my cargo wagons have half the capacity as usual, so that dream's on pause. You can't stop me from dreaming though, and despite all that, I went ahead and put together all of the insane ingredients required to make the train stops and rail signals. Seriously, just look at all of this. I wonder at what point I need to just give up explaining what I need to craft things, because they just keep getting exponentially more complicated. Well, my starter iron patch is finally dying, so it's time to get some more. Also, my medium power poles have a reach of like 25. Setting up trains is way more hassle than it's worth right now, and once again I'd like to say how great it is that these belts are so cheap and so fast, cause now I can just do this. Also, I never actually automated power production and was just hand-feeding coal this entire time, so I'll make some actual permanent power over here by this coal patch. I'm making this to be very expandable, and you want to know why? It's because I looked ahead and happened to realize that this is the best source of power I'll ever get. Here's my recipe for nuclear reactors. 25,000 lumps of coal to make a single reactor. Must be German nuclear power. If that was all, it would be fine, but no, look at the other stats. It consumes nuclear fuel insanely fast, puts out less power, and with half the neighbor bonus it usually does. That would all still be doable, but to really put the nail in the coffin, here's what it takes to make nuclear fuel cells. You know, usually you turn uranium into weapons, not the other way around. Yeah, so that's not happening, so I guess I'd better get comfortable with burning coal. Here's one upside, my steel furnaces are insanely fast, crafting 4 times as fast as usual. That's almost on par with fully beaconed electric furnaces in the endgame. Except they can't use productivity modules, which is a pretty big downside. Speaking of electric furnaces, what are their stats? 12 times slower than steel furnaces and 4 times the energy cost. Well, I guess I won't be using those either. I'm starting to sense a pattern here. Now I've been focusing on slowly researching all of the prerequisites for chemical science. And it's funny because none of these things are actually used to make it, but I still gotta research them. I was dreading setting up oil processing, but then I remembered something. We're living in the clown universe. And so I decided to actually check the ingredients I'll need for chemical science. Sure enough, there is no oil involved whatsoever. There's been a lot of messed up things this run, but this feels so wrong. As you can imagine, it'll take tons of stone to make all those repair kits, which is why I've set up another stone mine. Also, these power poles are an absolute mess. I think there's a reason why power poles usually don't have a wire range 4 times longer than their supply area. Once again, we're bringing it all in with belts. And here we are. These repair kits are the key to everything. Not only are they used in these crappy yellow inserters, but they're also used in making refined hazard concrete. I know it doesn't need to be said anymore, but making refined hazard concrete without making refined concrete first, it's strange. The last ingredient is constant combinators, and those are made out of iron and yellow underground belts, which are made out of burner inserters. Trying to trace backwards through all these insane recipes is more of a challenge than anything else, and it just keeps getting worse. Is this what being a beginner feels like? None of the recipes make sense, I'm always starved for resources. Yeah. If you ever want to recapture the feeling of playing Factorio for the first time, I genuinely recommend this mod. The chemical science has an insanely long crafting time, but even so, I think this number of assemblers was a little ambitious. Regardless, we've got chemical science. Obviously, the main thing I'm interested in is bots, but that'll take quite a while to get there, so in the meantime, I'll be making military science. It's actually quite easy, because the only thing I need to make is red wires. Everything else is already on site, and since I don't need to mass produce this stuff, just a little production is fine. Trying to extract items from the middle of a spaghetti mess is always fun. And I don't care at all anymore, so I'll be running a belt all the way around. The main reason for military science is the tank. Slapping down gun turrets just doesn't cut it anymore, and keeping biters out of my pollution cloud is becoming harder and harder. I need to make these batteries first before I get to build the tank, and this is my first actual use of crude oil. As far as I can tell, this is the only use for batteries, so I won't need to worry about making any more than this. With that, I've got the tank, and I can finally take out all those pesky biters. I'll just drive there, and, okay, tanks are slow, but I'm pretty sure they're not usually this slow. At least it has like 30% more hit points. That's fine, except the gun is weaker, shoots slower, and has less range. Well, looks like all I can do is ram things. I'd like to use explosive cannons, but again, everything is insanely expensive. I'd need all of this to fire one shell. If I had that kind of production, I'm not sure the pollution it created would even be worth the biters it could blow up. The flamethrower seems more powerful, but that's a close-ranged weapon, and as slow as this tank is, I feel like I'd get spittered to death before I even made it to the nests. So yeah, the tank, our sole means of biter management in the mid-game, is pretty much a bust. I can ram into things right now, but the moment big biters appear, it's over. Well, the good news is I've taken out enough biters to be safe for now, and so it's back to work. You might wonder why I'm researching uranium processing, despite resolving to never touch nuclear power, and that's because to make construction robots, I'm gonna need some unenriched uranium. To that purpose, I'm also making all of the things I'll need to make the centrifuge. I've got these shotgun shells made from furnaces that I originally built to make engine units, thinking I'd actually get to make cannon shells out of them. I've also got power switches, which is the most useful they will ever be. Then I went ahead and put in all of the effort to automate pump jacks so I could try and automate locomotives, but I don't want to talk about it, alright? Compared to iron and coal, copper is barely used, so only now is our starter patch drying up. So once again, it's time to make another mine. I've started using wooden power poles instead, because unlike the medium poles, they don't turn into a spider web of wires everywhere. Red splitters are still at a premium, but saturating belts like this is good enough. Now to bring it all the way to the base. I didn't need to make this all diagonal, but it's not like I can blow up cliffs, seeing as my cliff explosives take heat pipes, which I can't get unless I research the incredibly expensive and incredibly useless nuclear power technology. Also, copper ore only stacks to 20, so my inventory filled instantly, but leaving all of this garbage on the floor feels kind of in the spirit of this run. With the pollution from that new mine, there's a couple more nests I need to take care of. And now that I'm looking at it, this game is definitely taunting me because unlike my tank, my car's machine gun is super powered. It's a shame the damn thing's made out of paper, so using it in combat is pretty much impossible. Such is life in the randomized universe. As mentioned before, our iron demand is several times bigger than any other resource, so even this crappy temporary setup is going to need another iron mine if I want any hope of getting through all this chemical science research. So here's another massive line of belts. Hey, if it works, it works. And one thing that's nice is that 16 furnaces is all I'll need to saturate an entire belt of iron plates. It's terrifying how quickly the brain can adapt, because these purple inserters are starting to look normal here. We'll just plug that whole thing into the line with this splitter, and it's good enough. Okay, since I've got an extra belt of coal that I ran off of the mine supplying all of our power, I'll do what I should have done ages ago and finally automate red undergrounds and red splitters. The undergrounds are actually pretty easy, they just take tons of coal, but the splitters are the worst. Fast inserters and solar panels. The stone bricks are the easiest, but it's just so bizarre seeing these random furnaces in the middle of my spaghetti. And that's not even to mention that I'm turning iron into bricks. The solar panels take gun turrets, yellow splitters, and pistols. It always comes back to those damn pistols, doesn't it? The gun turrets take magazines, which are also made from pistols, but the good news is I've got these yellow splitters nearby that I already made for the centrifuges. Put all that together, and I'm finally free from handcrafting these things. Alright, we're almost there. Now we need to actually mine the uranium, and just like everything else, to make sulfuric acid, I'll apparently need to mix some pistols with water and copper. Forget the pistols, it's actually insane that the sulfuric acid doesn't require any petrochemicals at all. Just add water. Anyway, put that in there, and I can finally get some uranium. I'm so used to rushing bots that I completely forgot to check the recipe for roboports. And sure enough, they're locked behind purple science. Well, I'll be fine without roboports for a while. I'll just need to make some power armor, which takes 300 boilers. The ingredients to my personal equipment is so deranged, I'm pretty much forced to handcraft everything. The good news is, I've got 300% crafting speed, at least until it re-rolls in 30 minutes. I'll need these rockets as well, but I've got more plans for them. They're pretty easy to make, just taking power switches, raw uranium, and solid fuel, which I can make straight from crude oil. These rockets are the only thing I've got that can actually kill biters at reasonable costs. Anyway, after much effort, I've finally got it. My power armor, personal roboports, and solar panels. Some of you who don't play Factorio might be wondering if construction bots are worth all the effort, but they allow you to build things automatically by just placing... oh no. I hadn't even considered that their speed could be randomized too. They're less than half the speed they should be. There is research that can speed them up, but it's done with percentages, so they'll always be 55% slower than vanilla. To add insult to injury, despite being slower, they consume 50% more energy to move. I guess I'll need to wait for roboports, but that's definitely a setback towards expanding. Here's automated chemical plants. Seeing as I'm stuck with steel furnaces and solid fuel comes easy from crude oil, I was thinking I'd be able to solve the reduced cargo size of wagons and terrible stack size of copper by smelting everything on site and then moving it by train. Coal stacks terribly as well, but if I just moved around crude oil instead, it would be much more convenient for fueling the smelting outposts. I've been dreaming of using trains, but even after researching all of the speed upgrades available without yellow signs, these bots are completely worthless. It's faster to just do it myself, so that's what I start doing. By the way, these rails aren't cheap either, but if you want to expand, this is a must. One thing you miss without bots is the ability to simply paste things over forests. And just like that, I'm out of rails. This was incredibly painful, so I think I'll wait until roboports before setting up the trains. Even if I did set up a bunch of mining outposts, the biters would be a problem. Defenses are incredibly expensive, and simply surrounding something in walls would take hours of stockpiling resources. My tank is pretty much worthless now, but I did say I had a plan, and that's waiting patiently until the game gives me extremely high movement speed and using that to take down all the nests with rockets. As long as I'm fast enough, I can zip in, shoot a nest 2 times, and then zip out. Then I just need to repeat that for every single nest. Killing the worms isn't worth it because they're much more resistant to explosives and they're not what spawns enemies. I'm only after the nests. The problem with this method is that it's extremely time-consuming, completely dependent on luck, and not entirely safe, but it's the only biter solution I've got, since again, defenses are so expensive, making sure the biters don't spawn at all is pretty much my only option. That means it's significantly harder to expand, especially with the sheer volume of ores I'll need, because just one outpost would require clearing out hundreds of nests around the area, so that plan's on hold until I've got a better solution. I'd hoped to have my base sorted out to something more permanent by now, but it seems I'll need to spaghetti my way to purple science as well. Once again, I'll need to expand my mining outposts. Just one of these would be enough in vanilla Factorio, but this ain't your average run. At least I've got all these belts. That's the most terrifying thing about this run. It feels horrible, but there's always the chance it could have been even worse. In an effort to escape the spaghetti monster above, I've decided to gather all of the resources I'll need to make purple science down here, so I've got a fresh start. And it looks like I've rolled high speed again, so I've got to go kill more biters. It doesn't matter that I'm in the middle of doing something. When I roll high, I've got to take advantage of it. And so I've been focusing on the nests most at risk of entering my pollution. Anyway, now that that's over with, it's back to cooking spaghetti. I'm borrowing the iron belts from the previous build, but I'll need some more copper plates. And these super-powered steel furnaces sure come in handy in designs like this. It's so convenient being able to spit out an entire belt of plates just like that, but time to make the actual science. I hope you're ready for this, because this one's requirements are absolutely insane. Explosives, fluid wagons, and pump jacks, and each of those has their own rabbit hole of ingredients I've got to go down. But the limiters are off. I want this science, and so I'm going to use all of the spaghetti powers at my disposal. You're going to see some things that might terrify you, but remember, I'm a professional. Since it's got almost every recipe as potential ingredients now, everything is massively convoluted, so I'll be focusing on one ingredient at a time. The first one I'll focus on is explosives, and I hope you're paying attention because there's no way I'll be able to explain every little thing I've got to do to actually get this thing working. Fortunately, with massive air quotes, my tier 1 assemblers are fast enough that most of these recipes only need one assembler to meet demand, which is also because demand is almost non-existent thanks to my items being 5 to 10 times as expensive as they should be. The exception to that is the concrete recipe. Those take water, and tier 1 assemblers don't have a fluid input, so I'll be using tier 2 assemblers. Only problem is that they're 8 times slower. The best part is, the tier 3 assemblers, the whole reason I'm doing all this, are only 7 times slower than tier 1s. Between this, the furnaces, and the steam power, it's become clear that the game simply doesn't want me to upgrade anything ever. All of that finally gets to be turned into explosives, and we've got 1/3 of the ingredients to make purple science. Next item on the list are the fluid wagons. And once again, we've met our old friend, the pistol. Just like the green science, we're turning them into steam boilers, but this time those then get turned into big electric poles. Apart from that, the assembling machine 2s can feed off of the items that we already made for the explosives, but we're still going to need to make the actual fluid wagons, and that's its own monster. Each fluid wagon takes 8 steel chests, which are made out of 50 copper plates each. That's 400 plates in chests alone. And this is where that entire belt of copper plates we made will go. We'll need walls, and that means making a bunch more belts. And aren't underground belts wonderful? Well, the good thing about this is that those belts are used in offshore pumps as well as the walls, so as soon as we've got those taken care of, we're good to go. And once again, it's the return of the inline furnace to make the bricks we'll need. At least since everything takes coal as an ingredient, fuel is never far off. 2 down. Can you believe it? The last ingredient is pump jacks, which I've technically already automated, but it's all the way up in the other base, and that one's got its hands full just trying to make the first 4 sciences, so I'll make them again here. They're not as bad as the fluid wagons, and through the power of sponging off other builds, I set up the labs fairly painlessly. It might look like I'm intentionally making this as terrible as possible, but this is legitimately the easiest way to build, and despite the weird crafting times and ingredients, I've generally got an idea of what I can get away with. We can also borrow the assembler 2s they take away from the fluid wagon build. After all of that nonsense, we've finally got all 3 items to make purple science. Once again, I've built an ambitious amount of science assemblers, but it's not like it'll hurt it. Now we can just bring that to the labs. One problem, and that's that I've used up all of the space in front of my labs. No matter, using this secret technique, I can actually load the labs from behind. Using filter inserters, I can make it so that only purple and yellow sciences are moved upwards, while the other 4 get moved downwards, making sure that the inserters won't get stuck constantly moving packs in and out. I'd like you to appreciate this mess. It's absolutely beautiful. Yes, it's slow, but that's more because it takes an entire small country's worth of resources to make, rather than an issue with its design. The important thing is, we've got purple science, and finally access to the research that will get us roboports. For once, the recipe for assembling machine 3s is easy. I've already got the steel furnaces automated, and so I'll just need to make the sulfur, which simply takes water and crude oil. Definitely not a lot of oil processing this run. So many beginners say they were filtered to buy oil, so maybe this mod's for you. To make the roboports, we'll also need solar panels, but I'm just gonna steal those from the splitter build for now. Also, shout out to this gear setup, because this is genuinely the easiest way to get copper ore over there, and I still don't have cliff explosives. There it is, our first roboport. And as long as I've got a large enough network, it won't really matter that the bots are... Are you kidding me? Okay, once again, the possibility that the coverage was randomized too hadn't ever crossed my mind. The logistics network is 18 by 18. That's 87% smaller than it should be. Yeah, the construction area is only a little smaller, but the only way to connect robot networks is to make the logistics area overlap. I'd need a roboport every 18 tiles, and these things aren't cheap. Up until now, I've been rolling with the punches, but this is my breaking point. My plan was to use trains to disentangle this spaghetti nightmare and to make an expandable base despite the chaos. But after the terrible tank being effectively locked to tier 1 buildings and the slow-ass bots, it's over. The spaghetti has won. You should know that I'm usually not one to shy away from going above and beyond, but at this point, I think simply launching a rocket will be achievement enough. Plot twist, the starter base was actually the real base the entire time. I've immediately switched gears and now I'm going straight for yellow science, but if needing an entire new set of mines just for purple science didn't clue you in, I'm gonna need a ton more iron for this as well. And setting up this furnace stack is probably the only time you will ever see bots being useful this video. Compared to purple science, the ingredients aren't as complicated, but man are they expensive. I know I was asking for it by setting the value to maximum before starting this run, but to compare, here's the total cost of yellow science in the normal game, and here's the total cost here. Forget 5 times as expensive, this is over 10 times as expensive, and it's all in this night vision equipment. To make them, I'll need some sulfur, which again is the easiest thing in the world to make and essentially free, as well as several transport belts. The transport belts are also used in the walls, so that's why I'm making extra. Then I'll borrow the labs from the purple science build, and that'll give me all of the ingredients for the poison capsules. I feel like the majority of players have never even thrown a poison capsule, but here they are. They don't look too bad. Sure, each one takes 80 iron plates, but there's much worse recipes. And then you realize that I need 9 of them to make the night vision equipment. Not only that, I've got to add an extra 125 iron plates on top of everything. So yeah, we'll be using all of that iron I just set up. At least the rest is easy, because to make the explosive rockets, I'll just need some stone and constant combinators, and I'll just steal those from the previous build. You know something's wrong when the fact that it takes 300 coal is seen as a relief. Anyway, throw them all together and we've got our yellow science. The labs are already set up to accept them, so I just need to plug them into the other side of the purple science belt. Watching this whole thing in action, I'm starting to realize that there are some major resource shortages, and purple science isn't even on yet. Finishing all the research we'll need is going to be rough. However, it'll mean I've got plenty of time to set up all the final ingredients I'll need to build the rocket. They're unchanged from vanilla, and so we'll still need rocket fuel, low-density structures, and rocket control units. The fuel is first, and it simply takes power poles, which also take red science. It feels so weird using science to make other things, but it could be worse. It could take yellow science instead. And remember what I said about concrete? Well, rocket fuel also has a fluid ingredient, so that means I'll need to use tons of these awful assembler 2s, since making a single unit of rocket fuel with one takes an entire minute. Apart from that, it also takes petroleum gas, and this is the only recipe so far that's required an actual petrochem product. You might think that that means making an oil refinery for once, but nope. Because the cracking recipes get randomized too, I can just make straight petroleum. However, the recipe actually takes water and light oil. Yes, this is probably the only recipe that was rolled to be normal. Well, that just means I'll need to make light oil first, and that takes sulfuric acid and water. That's more like it. If you'll recall, our sulfuric acid is made from guns, and I can steal that from the pipe feeding the uranium mine. Not like I'm using that thing now that I've given up on ever setting up construction bots. That's 1/3 of the rocket up and running. I'm realizing that I'm going to need even more iron if I want any hopes of winning, but you know the drill by now. I'll also be bringing in another belt of coal, and that's one thing that's interesting about this mod. Things like coal and stone, which are usually afterthoughts, are now a vital resource. Then I'll just set up another furnace stack. These bots are sure trying their best. Even in Bizarro land, the fundamentals remain the same. If you're short on resources, just make more. Also, I've realized that the LDS requires rocket fuel as an ingredient, so I'll need to make even more, complete with another pistol to sulfuric acid factory. We are this close to beating the game, only 2 items left. Using the resources I've just gathered, the most important item I've got to build are the heat pipes. Guess I'll have to research nuclear power after all. Heat pipes are used in both the LDS and the RCUs, and they take an absurd amount of red science to build. The pipes are red, so I guess it only makes sense that they're built out of red things. Once again, we'll need a bunch of electronic circuits and repair kits, because the other ingredient for heat pipes is fast inserters. Whoa, that's weird. It's some kind of blue inserter. And you know what else fast inserters take? That's right, pistols. I've gotten so used to making these things that this whole factory springs up almost instantly. And I'm really glad that my red undergrounds are so long. So much of this spaghetti would have been impossible without it. Turn those pistols into magazines, turn those into fast inserters, and there we are, heat pipes. With this one item, we're practically done. The LDS takes stone furnaces as well, but those are made entirely from coal. With that, we've got our LDS, and only one item stands in our way now. The only thing left is to make assembler 1s for the RCUs. It's so convenient having every resource nearby, especially when you've completely given up on making things intelligent or expandable, and trying to figure out how to extract something you've already made from your own monstrosity is like an emergent puzzle game. Also, these designs definitely have their own charm. After an hour, even you forget how these things can function, but somehow everything just works. It's like magic. There's our RCUs. That means the only thing holding us back from victory is the final rocket silo research. It's been slow going, especially considering the research costs are randomized as well, and many of them are more expensive. But considering the only thing left to do is wait, it's manageable. There are a few modifications I can do to help speed things up, and I'm running low on power, but we're in the final stretch. Look at it. This is my masterpiece. By the way, the only reason all of the labs are lit up is because they're 3 times slower and I never researched any lab speed. My actual science per minute is like 10. Also, the randomizer removed all the module slots from my lab, so even if I wanted to make productivity modules, I can't even use them. Yep, just gotta wait. So it finally completes, and only now did I actually check what I needed to make the rocket silo. Okay, false alarm. It looks like I'm gonna need to spend another hour and a half researching uranium ammunition just to make the uranium cannon shells. For the rocket silo research, I had a bunch of science buffered, but now this thing's running on fumes and I've got to shore up my supply problems. What, you mean this design has problems? No way. The biggest improvement I can do is add more labs, because both yellow and purple science are running off of this one factory, and just one night vision equipment takes 9 of these things. Hopefully this will be the last furnace stack I'll ever need to set up just to satisfy this beast. It's so funny to me that I've been delayed by a single item under uranium ammo. That's like the game's final farewell. The only way it could have been worse is if it took artillery research instead. The exciting thing is that we'll actually need to make blue belts, and the reason I never mentioned them before is because they're the most boring speed possible, exactly 45 items per second. And for an extra 3.5, they're definitely not worth the 20x cost compared to red belts. At least I get to make lubricant, and wouldn't you know it, it's made out of sulfuric gun acid as well. Now we've just got to wait for enough of these cannon shells to be built. It's easy to forget because they're all red belts, but this base is eating nearly 6 blue belts worth of iron ore. That is not a small base. If this were vanilla, I'd be closer to 100 SPM rather than 10, but here we are. These cannon shells are actually fairly cheap compared to everything else, and they do decent damage. It's a shame that there's not much sense in expanding with such terrible bots into trains. Oh well, what's important is I've finally gathered everything I'll need to make the rocket silo. All that's left to do is plug in our 3 ingredients and wait to collect our victory. I didn't need to put it in here and route all these belts through the entire base, but it felt appropriate for this run. This is probably the only time in my entire life that I'm not putting productivity modules into the rocket. Check out my productivity 3s. Yeah, plus 2% productivity. Taking only 25,000 total resources, how could I resist? Maybe if I was building 100 rockets, I'd get a return on my investment. In retrospect, I never actually noticed that the Tier 2 productivity modules gave me plus 11%, which would have been great had it not been for the fact that all of my buildings were effectively locked to Tier 1 and had no module slots. Especially in the case of the labs where it just removed all of my module slots. It's like this mod knows, it's been actively taunting me. The best part is, you know that run at the start that was literally bricked? Well, that run had huge power poles, 200 items per second blue belts, and completely normal bots. Well, the randomizer giveth, the randomizer taketh. Frankly, I'm just happy to have made it this far. And after all that, we're finally here. Usually I try to automate space science, but here's the satellite recipe for your viewing pleasure. It should be obvious why I don't really want to do it. Some of you might think that this run only took 21 hours to complete, but let me tell you, those were some very long hours. The mental strain of trying to make sense out of this crazy mess was leagues above space exploration in C-Block. Although, being forced to make do with what you've got was actually quite interesting, and inspired some special designs. And while my hope was to make an actual base out of this, thinking about it, I think this fits the spirit of the run just fine. As always, thanks to all my patrons, and I'll see you again next time.